Okay, so we've had a look at SLAP, or Situation, Layout, Audience and Purpose, and how it can quickly identify exactly what you need to be writing in terms of question 5 on paper 2. It's very useful because if you remember that little saying, then you'll quickly be able to identify the main things you need to bear in mind before you put pen to paper and start to write. So we're just going to draw out some of the information you're going to need to answer question 5 from question 5 using SLAP. So firstly, situation. The situation is quite general, but we can take some of this information here. So it's talking about seeing more and more environmental disasters affecting the world every day. So we know that's the basic topic for the speech. We know that it's a debate as well. So we've got our situation. Our situation is something to do with environmental disasters and that sort of thing. Layout. Layout's useful because it helps us determine what layout features to put in. For example, if it's an article, if it's asking us to write an article, we immediately know it's going to have to be laid out like an article. It's going to need to include a headline, it's going to need to include the author's name and a date. And that's just the bare basics of an article. Obviously, there's lots more things to remember here. You can always look at last week's work if you're a bit stuck on that. Now, we know that that's a speech. So in terms of layout, we know that we're going to have to address the audience at the start of the speech. We will probably want to refer to the audience at least a couple of times through the actual text of the speech, maybe by asking them rhetorical questions. And we're going to have to close up by saying thank you for listening. Our audience. Our audience is young people. So that can tell us a lot about what sort of tone we're going to have to use, what sort of style we're going to have to use. If it's young people at a school or a college, that tells us that we're going to want to be a little bit formal, but we're not going to want to be overly formal. That might put our audience off. We need to show that we are, paying attention to our audience. So we might want to include a bit of humour in there maybe as well, just to engage people. And our purpose is fairly straightforward. We are always going to be writing something persuasive. For question 5, paper 2, you will always write persuasively. That is one of the things that it judges you on. In this case, we're persuading people to take more responsibility for protecting the environment. So that immediately tells us that, well, we're going to want to use some of those persuasive techniques that we've seen in those speeches and those articles throughout the course. It also tells us what the topic is as well, really, doesn't it, a little bit? It tells us that it's about taking more responsibility for protecting the environment. So instantly, in under 3 minutes, I've looked at that question, I've identified the situation, so what I'm going to be writing about, and why. We've identified the layout, so we've identified that it's a speech, and what I'm going to have to do to write text for a speech. We've identified our audience, which is young people at a school or a college, and we've also identified the purpose, or why we're writing. We're writing to persuade them to take more responsibility for protecting the environment. So instantly, with that in mind, we can go on to write, to plan maybe in a little more detail, confident in the knowledge that we're going to fully answer that question.